Welcome to the Private Practice Startup Podcast, where we help ambitious private practitioners across the globe to brand themselves and grow their dream practices. We chat with successful private practitioners, business coaches, and marketing experts, bringing you tons of practice building ninja tips. Visit privatepracticestartup.com for awesome resources, attorney-approved private practice paperwork, and our signature marketing e-course. Here are your co-hosts, Dr. Kate Campbell and Katie Lemieux.
Hey there, everybody. Welcome back to another episode of the Private Practice Startup Podcast. We hope you guys are doing well today. And we hope that you guys joined us last week as we interviewed Judy Herman talking about how to overcome the fear of getting off insurance panels. So we talked a lot about the fear, and many of you have that as you begin to migrate off insurance panels, whether you're becoming a hybrid model or full fee model. So definitely check that out. I'll be announcing our guest shortly today. But before you do that, we hope that for those of you who are new to us, thank you for joining us for this episode. And we hope that you stick around. And for those of you who are loyal listeners, welcome back. We have a gift for you guys, and that is your Dream Private Practice Playbook. It's a free gift, and it is our step-by-step proven system of how Kate and I have created our six-figure full fee private practices and helped many therapists do the same. You can just head on over to privatepracticestartup.com, head on over to the resources tab and grab it there. Or if you happen to be on our show notes page for this podcast episode, you can find it there as well. Today, we are inviting Tighe O'Connor, co-founder of Theory About That. And we're going to be talking about the therapy client journey on this episode. A little bit about Tighe. He's won 9 Addies for his creative marketing work. After working as a director of operations for a marketing agency, he started his own creative agency and Theory About That, working specifically with therapists, spending 2021 and 2022 working remotely across South America and Europe. And we're just chatting a little bit about that. And hopefully we'll dive into some of that as well as we begin our podcast. But before we dive in and say hello and, get moving on this topic, let's just take a quick moment for our sponsor.
Okay, everybody, it's sponsor time. Look, this past year was super stressful, but if you own a private practice, this could also be the year that you switch to a better payroll. Gusto wasn't just built for small businesses. It was built for the people behind them. Their online payroll is so easy to use. Gusto can automatically calculate paychecks and file all of your payroll taxes, which means you have more time to actually run your business. Plus, Gusto does way more than just payroll. Gusto helps with time tracking, health insurance, 401ks, onboarding, benefits, offer letters, access to HR experts. You get the idea. It's super easy to set up and get started. And if you're moving from another provider, they can transfer all of the data for you. It's no surprise that 94% of customers are likely to recommend Gusto. Here's the best part. Because you're a listener, you get 3 months totally free. All you have to do is go to gusto.com/PPS, as in the Private Practice Startup. That's gusto.com/PPS.
Greenpoint Med is a leading provider of medical billing and credentialing services to the community of mental health providers and practices. Running a healthcare practice can be hard, and working with insurance can make it even harder. Cut through the complexity of insurance by working with Greenpoint Med on any billing or credentialing need. Greenpoint Med offers customized solutions to providers and practices to help make running the insurance side of your practice simple and efficient. Any state, any insurer, any issue, Greenpoint Med can help. Bonus alert, if you're a Therapy Notes user, Greenpoint Med's billing services are directly integrated with the platform. All billing work is done directly in Therapy Notes. If billing for your practice is taking up too much time or causing way too many headaches, call Greenpoint Med today for a free consultation. Just reference code StartupNation. Go to greenpointmed.com and schedule your free consultation right there on the homepage. Again, that's greenpointmed.com. Tighe, welcome.
Yeah, thank you for having me. This is exciting.
We are excited to have you. And so we were just sharing a little bit about what's going on with you right now. You're in Columbus, Ohio, freezing, not because it's just freezing outside because you have no power.
Yes, it's like the story of Texas all over again. And yeah, and as I was saying, coming from Colombia, the country, in this beautiful little town called Medellin, where it's like 75 year round. And then I come home to see the family, and it's just an awful frozen hellscape. So,
oh man. So tell our audience, like, where have you traveled to in South America, and how long do you stay working there, and how long do you come home? So interesting.
Yeah. For that, we actually just started that journey. So, about 2 years ago, my wife and I, we go on these daily walks, right? So every morning we go on this walk, and we spend that time to think about our lives, our businesses, and what we want to change and do about it, right? And so 2 years ago, we were going, what is our perfect work environment? What do we want to do? This is all before COVID, before the pandemic happened. And so we put a plan in action to make that happen by moving businesses more remotely, making the changes to make that happen, so that in 2 years we could work from anywhere in the world. And so a year later, COVID happened, and it made it even more obvious this needed to happen. And so with our agencies up and running, we fully made the jump. And so January of this year, we went to Colombia to start out. And so I'm back in the States for a little bit, but then we'll be spending the rest of the year traveling abroad, working full time, jumping in and out of co-working spaces, et cetera.
Very cool. And where are some of the places that you guys want to go to in Europe?
Europe, that plan's changing all the time, obviously with things happening. But right now, we're really excited about Italy, Greece, even these little hidden cities in Eastern Europe, right? Where everyone always talks about, whether it's Ireland, England, Germany, et cetera. I think there are a lot of cool, interesting places to work and discover in Eastern Europe with really strong Wi-Fi connections and work environments.
Very cool. Very cool. Well, I know we're not here to talk about travel, although I'm sure many of us listening to this podcast. Yeah, right. If you're listening to it and we're still in the pandemic and stuff like that, you're probably like thinking about all the places that you want to go. I know I am. I'm taking my first flight in a year and a half next week. So I'm excited. Woo-hoo! But let's dive into the topic, talking about the therapy client journey. So we know that your wife is a therapist, but I know our audience doesn't know that. So share with us a little bit about, what you did before and how you kind of joined, wanting to serve therapists with what you do.
Yeah, absolutely. It kind of became a perfect mix because my history, as you already mentioned a little bit, is in the digital marketing, creative type of space. So I started being a digital media specialist, working at an agency, and then eventually working my way up personally to being a creative director of operations, kind of seeing the creative side and the operations side. And then my wife, she's just typically a trained therapist, right? So she went to undergrad, she went to grad school. She did a lot of family and marriage, addiction, kind of training across the board there. And she just applied for her licensure. So she's in the middle of that big process. And so she is a trained therapist. I'm on the marketing side. And so I left the agency to start working on my own about 3 years ago or so. And I decided, man, it's really time for me to start my own agency because I really miss the agency world. I miss working specifically with a certain industry. And that's when we thought that'd be a perfect mix. And so theory about that became this company where we're mixing really strong creative, really good marketing principles with a knowledge about marketing. So we really started out with her writing lots of content for therapists. Because as you know, you've had a lot of podcasts with content marketers. Having someone who knows what they're talking about is super important for content. So she was a critical 50% of that business.
Very nice. And I'm sure many people also listening are like, oh, that'd be like the perfect marriage, right? Like I'm a therapist and my spouse is like a marketer. That would be amazing.
I don't think about marketing for myself.
Yeah. And the copywriting piece, so many therapists really struggle with that. So it's nice that you guys bring that to the table. I've seen a few of the websites that you all have designed for some of my team members at Baby Therapy, my group practice, and they've been beautiful sites. So you guys have done a really nice job there. Yeah, so let's dive into this idea about the therapist journey, the therapy client's journey. Not the therapist journey, but the client's journey. So let's talk a little bit about that. What's your take on the importance of focusing on that journey for clients?
Yeah, absolutely. And so for us, it really came from an existing framework because it was a phrase I just kind of made up because I'm sure you guys, or maybe some of your listeners have heard about the buyer's journey. So if you've taken any sort of marketing course or if you've listened to a podcast or two, I'm sure that was brought up. And so that is just a framework to think about the stages that someone goes through in order to buy your product, right? And so the 3 stages, just for some context, are the awareness stage, the consideration stage, and the decision stage. And so essentially that's walking through the awareness stage being, okay, I have this problem, I have this symptom, I need something to change, so let me search whatever my problem is. Then the consideration stage is once you learn, oh, I have this issue, I need to figure out what is going to solve it. Is it going to be computer? Is it going to be this service? What's it going to be? And the final stage, decision stage, is going, okay, I know I need the service. I know I need this platform, whatever it is. What company should I go with? And so it's really this framework to think about. You have 3 different types of people out there. How is your marketing approach marketing to those 3 specific people? And I think the best way to talk about it would be to talk about the big brands that use it. And so I think this is just good just to lay the foundation for where this came from. And so to me, the 2 big brands that do this really well are Disney and Apple, right? You always hear about these companies that have great, essentially end-to-end customer experiences, where you have Apple, where obviously they put blood, sweat, tears into the products that they create, but there's obviously so much intention behind the rest of the experience. If you look at their marketing, if you look at the storefront experience, to buying the product, to unboxing the product, everything is thought out along this continuum of someone's experience with their product. And so when I've been working with therapists over the years, I'm trying to think, how can I take this and specify it? How can I take it and make it more applicable to therapists themselves?
Mm-hmm. Very cool. So talk a little bit more about that. So we talk about like the buyer aspect. So then talk about the client, right? So what are they doing in this process as they're looking for a therapist? And then why is what the therapist says, capture them so important? It's interesting, and I'm excited to talk about this because I was recently looking at some therapist websites, and, it's just like, oh my gosh, I'm sure you do great work, but it doesn't say like, you know what I mean? And it's so important. I mean, this is what Kate and I teach all the time and really help therapists to build and grow their dream practice by, what it is that you're showing online as an aspect of really acquiring your ideal client. But it's just so very important. So I'd love for you to talk about the client and then that therapist reaching that client.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think just to mention a few different ways of why the therapist even needs to do this, because you mentioned a website where you went to the website, you said, I'm sure they do great work, but you don't know, right? And so a lot of that is going to come from just building this authority through the content that you create, right? So everything that we're going to be talking about today is probably going to lead to you doing some more social media work, you increasing your website content, writing more blogs, more content there. And all that's going to be helpful in expanding your footprint online, right? People can find you on social media. They go to your website. They see this big library of resources on your website, and that's really going to bring authority and trust to your brand. And in general, this is going to help a lot of things in terms of just inbound marketing. And so I'm sure you guys and your listeners have heard about inbound versus outbound approach. When you start thinking how the client feels and where they're at in their journey, then you can understand what kind of content do I need to create in order to attract them, right? So this is inbound marketing. I'm putting stuff out there that people are searching out on their own. I was listening to your podcasts earlier this week, and someone was talking about the idea of a client calling them, right? And saying, hey, I want to use your services, and going, oh, I didn't need to pay for an ad or didn't do anything. They just found me on their own. And so a lot of this strategy is going to make that happen. Mm-hmm. So yeah, let's jump into the 4 stages of what I created as this therapy client journey. So really, I wanted to think about it from the very beginning all the way to the very end, and really it becomes a full circle. So the 4 stages are the curious stage, the consideration stage, the client stage, and the champion stage. So starting off with the curious stage, this is someone who is aware of, let's call them like symptoms in their life, or certain, maybe it's just pain points in their life, desires they have to change, something they want to look out and make a change in their life. And so they're asking a lot of questions like maybe specific of, what does depression feel like? Or what should I do about my anxiety? They might not even know they want therapy, right? It's just, I have these symptoms. I'm asking these questions that we know therapists can answer really well. And so because of that, there are 2 main avenues in order to reach them very well. And so usually I recommend for this stage being organic search and social media. And so I say those 2 for 2 reasons. Organic search is super helpful for obviously someone searching out their symptom, right? And so writing blogs of 5 steps of dealing with anxiety or what is depression, these blogs are super helpful for someone in that stage because those are the specific questions they're asking. We're not talking even yet about our therapy services. We're just talking about the symptoms that they're experiencing, right? And so that's super helpful. And social media comes in handy for someone who is almost even before that stage. They're not even looking up their symptoms, right? They're maybe just scrolling around on social media and they have this feeling deep down of whether it's anxiety, depression, whatever it is. And then they see a post that their friend shares about something that you created that speaks to that symptom. And so they weren't even looking for it, but then this was an avenue in order to get them connected to you as a therapist. And so that's what it is. It's really casting this is almost a wide net approach for this curious stage because you're putting a lot out there, hoping to have useful content for anyone to come to you. So that would be that curious stage. And again, a lot of this, everything you write needs to be in those buyers' pain points, right? We're not talking about this heavy sales pitch. We're not saying, hey, come to me for free consultation. You need therapy. You need this. It's really talking through the questions they're asking and being honest and actually helpful to the questions they have. Because then that's going to lead to the consideration stage, the second stage of this process. And so this is someone who maybe understands their pain points and they might even understand the type of therapy they need. This is when someone's going to start typing in couples therapy near me, or what should I look for in a therapist, right? They know they need therapy. They decided that that's the solution for them. Now let me try to figure out what those solutions are. And this is probably not where you start talking about different modalities, right? I've worked with certain clients where they want to start writing service pages based on DBT, MDR, where they're talking about all these different modalities that no one knows about, right? No one in the real world knows what those modalities are. And so it's all about trying to use the language that they are using and the questions they are asking. And so it's almost just a general thing to remember about SEO in general, right? It's not the secret formula. It's Google, this company, is trying to think of how are people looking for your businesses? And then so you need to be thinking of how can I be as most helpful as possible to the person looking for this service.
I really like how you're breaking it down in these 4 steps and in the whole client's journey process. And this is a skill that clinicians are so excellent at. It's a micro skill of using the client's language and being able to really identify those key phrases and the pain points and what they're struggling with, and then also their hopes, their dreams, their desires, their goals, and what they want to work on. And when you're talking about the same things over and over and over again with your clients in therapy, that's the stuff that becomes the content for your blog. It becomes the content for your website so that you can attract more clients just like your ideal clients, which is, it's really powerful. And it's a skill that clinicians are already so skilled at. It's just a matter of using it in a different way, in a way to connect with people and potential clients out there and bring them through that curious stage to the next step in the process. Why don't we go ahead and take a quick break for our sponsor before we dive into the next step?
Is managing your practice stressing you out? Try Therapy Notes. It makes billing, notes, scheduling, and telehealth a whole lot easier. Check it out, and you will quickly see why it's rated the highest EHR on Trustpilot with over 1,000 verified customer reviews and an average customer rating of 4.9 or 5 stars. You'll notice the difference from the first day you sign up for the trial. They offer live phone support 7 days a week. So when you have questions, you can quickly reach someone who can help. You are never wasting time looking for answers. If you're coming from another EHR, they make the transition really easy. Therapy Notes will import your client's demographic data free of charge during your trial so you can get going right away. Use the promo code PPS to get your first 2 months for free, or try out Therapy Notes for free, no strings attached, including their very reliable telehealth platform. Make 2021 the best year yet with Therapy Notes.
And I was thinking as you were talking, Kate, the other reason like why niche is so important, right, is because you become an expert at something. And imagine if you tried to niche in depression and anxiety and couples and this and that, right? Like you're constantly having to think of content from all of those areas. But when you're a specialist and you niche in something, content creation becomes easy because like Kate, you mentioned, it's like you're talking about it all day in session. You're thinking about it. You're curious about it yourself. You want to put out more. You want to help more. You're passionate about it. And it's just this like beautiful, I always call it's very like reciprocal, right? Like in the sense of what you give your clients, what they give you, what you're interested in, what you're curious about, what you give out, what they're wanting. And it's just it's very cool. I mean, it's interesting, right? Because going into business, we often cast a wide net unless we are coming into business very specific and knowing what our niche is. Mm-hmm. But as you niche down, actually business becomes easier. So anyways, Tighe, back to you.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think even just to tag onto that real quick, because I think it's something I'm going to get into later to discuss how to use it, is it's really just about this mindset shift where you mentioned passion. And so to me, I think people overthink it. They're thinking, man, what should my niche be? Should I focus on this or that? But really just ask yourself, what are you passionate about? What do you want to write about? And then find those one or two things that you really love doing and dive down those alleys, right? And then writing becomes fun. It becomes passionate. It can become a creative outlet as opposed to this boring marketing task that you have to do every single month, right? So yeah, super helpful insight. Okay, so the third stage. The third stage being the client themselves, right? So once they've figured out, okay, I need couples therapy. Let me go around trying to find therapists I need to find. Then they find you, they call you for that first session. This is where you might think, okay, content marketing doesn't matter anymore. I'm done. I just need to do a good job. And that's true. That definitely is a big part of it. You need to be a good therapist, aka have a good product in order for this whole thing to work. But I think we could easily sleep on these easy opportunities to make these people in the client stage have an even better experience, right? Because it's not like Apple, they sell a great computer, they're just going to put it just in the Best Buy and call it a day. They're going to rethink the storefront experience for what they do. And so I think there's some aspects that we can bring for therapists into the client stage. And so some questions that people on the stage might be asking are, is there more that I can do after my session? How can I build upon work that I'm doing in my therapy? And so to go back to the Apple example of, I think therapists need to think of consistent ways to have a consistent brand experience across the board, right? So me hearing your voice on social media, reading your posts on social media should definitely reflect the person that I'm in session with, right? So that's a big struggle and to outsourcing all the work you do is making sure that whoever you outsource it to is speaking in your voice and speaking the way that you would speak, right? Because it needs to be consistent across the board. Because if they fall in love with you on social media, that needs to be reflected in your sessions, right? You can't mislead them through that. And so thinking through that entire experience and then really get down to the details. And this is just a fun exercise of take an hour aside of every 6 months and think through every little piece of your process, right? When someone walks in my front door, how can I make that better? How can I make that 10% better? When I hand them the pen, what does that pen say? Does it just say my logo name, or can it say something funny or creative or something that just makes me stand out from the rest? I was actually reading a book last night that I found as a good example. It was an older book that's talking about this company called CD Baby. It doesn't really matter if you know what they do. Essentially, they sell CDs during the heyday of CDs. And he made this decision where he was looking over his process. Whenever someone bought a CD, it just sent out a standard email, hey, it's on the way, blah, blah, blah. And so he just sat down for 20 minutes and said, how can this email be memorable? And so he wrote out this crazy, hilarious, it was basically a giant story of, we have monks that are slowly preparing the casing for your CD and is traveling on a train across Siberia. This whole funny thing that ended up gathering tons of news attention, tons of attention for every customer, or at the minimum made a customer smile, right? And so it was this 20 minutes of work that paid off for the next 5 years or so, right? And so as a therapist, thinking past the session, past the couch, past the room of how can this experience be better or different? I think another great example is initial paperwork, that first session experience, et cetera. Then the last stage being the champion stage. And so if you've talked about HubSpot, this might be similar to how to delight a customer, right? So not only is it someone who's a client, but how can this be someone who is constantly recommending you and you're providing value to that client that already loves you and makes it even the next top experience? And to me, this is where we start seeing this therapy client journey be less of a line and more of a 360 circle, right? Because the goal of this stage is to enable these champions of yours to start sharing, helping, recommending those people who are in that curious stage. So a lot of the content recommendations are actually pretty similar between these 4 stages because it's talking to 2 different people, but it's the same tools that you're putting into their hands. And so, for example, these people in this stage are going to be asking questions like, how can I get my spouse, my best friend, my mother-in-law to sign up for these services? Or how can I share some of this great experiences I've had with others, right? And so this is super helpful in a world where therapy isn't like a restaurant where you can directly ask people for reviews and just badger people like forever for reviews. Therapy is a little more gray and ethically challenging to do something like that. And so we need to get creative on how we can make it easy for people to refer and share your services. And so for me, that's again where blogs and social media are going to come into account, right? So if you have an existing client who loves you, they love going to your site to read your blogs, read your resources, they're going to be very likely to share that with other people as long as it's content that they care about, right? For social media, if you aren't running a channel where you're constantly promoting your services, you're asking for this, you're asking for that, but as opposed to just putting out content, putting out value, that will get shared with their friends. And you're just making it easy for someone to recommend you in a very easy, passive way.
Mm-hmm. Nice. I love how you use the big brands to talk about, and Kate and I talk about this often, about every touch point is marketing, right? And I love how you talk about the pen and the CD baby and how do you stand out and be memorable? And that's really important, especially if you're in a saturated market. You know, what is it that you do to go above and beyond, funny, quirky, but all of that also should be part of your brand. So if you're funny and quirky, be that. You know, I know a lot of people struggle with that is, you know, wanting to be themselves, but worried about, will people receive it or not? And so I love that you kind of talk about all those different touch points. What is it that you most want our audience to take away from your message today?
I think a few things. One is to change their mindset on content and to change their mindset on marketing. I think kind of what we got to before of how can we change your mind of, there's this blog thing I got to do. I got to think of all the SEO rules before I write this blog. I got to take a 20-hour course before I even start anything. And to me, it's all that super important. You definitely should learn what you're doing, but just right? So structure that however works for you. I mean, I'm sure we've all heard of the idea of building habits, right? Where it's, you don't want to have this big audacious goal. What's a simple goal that you can't talk yourself out of? Whether it's every morning you wake up and I'm just going to write one sentence. And that's the goal that you have. But then of course, as you'll find out, you might write a paragraph, you might write a full page, you might write a blog from that one sentence. Maybe it's at the end of the week, I'm going to take an hour. I'm not going to write this perfect SEO blog, but I'm just going to write something that was on my mind from this past week. And it's going to be something that I know 5 of my clients are going to care about. Or maybe better put, 5 of my ideal clients would care about, like what I want to say to them. And you take the time really as a creative output, as a fun thing to write that and put it on your website.
Nice. And there's so many ways to do that. And one of the things I definitely recommend is setting a time to do those things, right? Because if you're not naturally, you know, a writer and stuff like that, like setting time to do that, or you can do videos, whatever really naturally calls to you. And there's other ways to do those things. People can transcribe them for you. There's revkey.com. There's all these different resources that really can help you. I know when we had Jen Fredette on the podcast talking about copywriting, one of the tips I loved that she gave was when you're writing copy is just in a blog, right, is talk to one person. And I was like, so every time I imagine, you know, when we're doing stuff for the private practice startup overall, is I always think about my dear and best friend, Tani Mendez, and what would I say to her? And my personality comes out even more, right? because it would just be like a conversation that we're having together. So thank you so much for, being here today. I love the topic. I love your perspective. And I know that you have some resources and information for our audience. What is that?
Yeah, absolutely. So I think if you go to our website /PPS, so that's theoryaboutthat.com/PPS. And so there, I think I have two things that could be helpful. One being a very in-depth ebook. So if you want to sit down for an hour or so with a cup of coffee and kind of get a good in-depth understanding of marketing, that could be a good approach for you. But then I also have a checklist for people, because often a lot of my discovery calls with new clients are all about like, there's so much to do. What should I be doing? Tell me all I need to do. That's what that checklist is for. It essentially will run down everything you need to be thinking about for your marketing. What I would encourage is either you don't have that many clients and you can afford to spend your own time to get some of those things done on the list, or you're too busy with clients, so outsource it for someone else to do. But essentially it's a checklist of this is stuff that you as a company, as a business, should be doing.
Awesome. Well, thank you so very much. And I'm just curious, how did you create your business name?
Well, that's a fun one, because it was actually an idea. Before that, my wife, when she was a young kid, she always wanted to be a therapist. I think like a lot of therapists out there, right? And so in her mind, she always said this phrase of, "Oh, I have a theory about that," because she just always was curious and wanted to talk about different things and personalities and relationships. And so that originally was an idea. She wanted to be a blog for herself, where she would just write her own thoughts and ideas. And then it grew into writing content for other people.
Very cool. I love that. Thank you for sharing that story. And thank you so much for being here with us. And Startup Nation, we hope you enjoyed this episode. I know I did. I know I'm biased anyways, because I love talking about this stuff, Kate and I. We hope that you guys join us next time for a very important topic. And we are going to be talking about the death to hustle and grind culture. Why being so busy and grinding it out is not always the best. So definitely check out that podcast next time.
Yes. And thank you so much for being here, Tighe. It was great to connect with you again. And I'm sure Startup Nation loved the episode. It's time for our superhero shout out to Tongue Twister for today's episode, which comes from our dear friend and colleague, Dr. Danny Moy. Danny says, both Dr. Kate and Katie do a phenomenal job with their intentionality as it pertains to fostering content and helping people become more confident and successful as private practice owners. Their guidance over the years has been monumental for so many of us, leading to magnetic and impactful businesses. It's an honor to know them as colleagues, and also, my goodness, I'm going to have to pause. We got to edit that. I have to make my screen bigger because I'm having a hard time reading it from this angle. It's a long testimonial, so it's like, oh my goodness. All right, so we'll have the editor cut this out and I'll just start at the sentence again. It's an honor to know them as colleagues, and it is always reassuring to know that they have a plethora of resources. I purchased the paperwork and supervision-based documents in the past, and they've been super helpful. The private practice startup is distinguished, consultation business, cut above the rest. Thank you so much, Dr. Danny. We appreciate your feedback. And Startup Nation, we hope you all really enjoyed today's episode, and we look forward to seeing you on the next time too. If there's a topic that we have not had on our 200 and some episodes, definitely let us know. We really want to create content that is speaking to your needs and goals along the private practice journey. So in the meantime, stay inspired, and we'll see you next week. Bye, everybody. Thanks for joining us on The Private Practice Startup. Visit theprivatepracticestartup.com for awesome resources, free trainings, attorney-approved private practice paperwork, and so much more.